It is an initiative by the General Conference, and we know that in the beginning of the year, many people are being very motivated and they are trying to make right choices. And health-wise, these are some of the choices or initiatives that people want to commit to, especially in the beginning of the year. Now, today we're going to spend some time based on the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, and some of the knowledge that we have, and we're going to talk about sleep, rest, and redemption. And for the opening, I would like to share a Bible verse which is found in Psalms chapter 4, verse 8, a well-known Bible verse. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Now, I do believe that we all are looking for peace. We're looking for a good sleep. We're looking for safety. So having all this in mind, it is interesting as we look at the next graph. I hope you can see it. It's a little smaller font, but I'll try to kind of cover it. The average lifespan of a person in America, it is about 78 years. And this graph kind of depicts what a person does during those 78 years on average. And it starts on the left. I'll start with a little pinkish color. 1.3 years of our lifetime we spend commuting. 1.5 years, it's part of the child care. 2.5 years, we spend shopping. 2.5 years, we spend grooming. 3.5 years, we spend in studying, education. 4.5 years, 4 years, we spend eating and drinking. And it continues. 6 years, we spend in doing chores. Now, 9 years, people in America, on average, they spend on TV and video games and social networks. So that's 9 years. 10.5 years, we spend working. And now, just pay attention to this, 28.3 years we spend in sleeping. So that's 1/3 of our life, it is sleeping. So we're left with 9 years. What do you do? How do you spend these 9 years? Each one has a little different way in which we can answer this. But the Bible gives us some good stories about people using their time wisely and also sleeping good because of that. So let's go to the New Testament and let's read in Acts chapter 12, verses 1 to 3 to begin with, and we'll continue in the same chapter. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. And because he saw it pleased to the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. And then were the days of unleavened bread. Now, this is the time when the church was persecuted. When persecution was possibility for Peter, you remember outside the Sanhedrin walls when Jesus was arrested and he was brought to trial, Peter, what did he decide to do? To deny the Lord. And in face of the persecution, the disciples all hid, they're all gone, disappeared. But now, after a couple of years, we see Peter in front of persecution. And what a transformation. At this time, he's not denying Christ. At this time, he's not running away for his life. And he is just fine to be actually arrested, as we're going to learn. Verses 4 and 5. And when he had apprehended him, talks about Peter, he put him in prison and delivered him to the 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter or Passover to bring him forth to the people. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. Now we see that the context in Peter's life, it's a little different. He was chained by 2 soldiers, and we know that after the Passover, they were going to be done with him. Now, he's locked in a prison. He's away from his freedom, but he still has time to find peace. And we're going to read about this. And important, the church was praying about him. Verses 6 and 7. And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. And the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hand. Now, based on these verses, we can see that Peter was in quite deep sleep there. And the angel actually had to hit Peter on the shoulder. He had to move Peter because of his deep sleep. And we have to take this as a lesson for us today. We know that we are living in the last days of this world, that great persecution, it is ahead of us. But should we lose sleep because of that? Too many people are worried today about the death decree, about the Sabbath, about the Sunday law. They're all going to happen. But if we have the unshaken faith in God, this should not make us worry too much. And I would like to share a paragraph that is found in the Story of Redemption, page 294, paragraph 2. And it talks about Peter. On this last night before the execution, a mighty angel, commissioned from heaven, descended to rescue him. The strong gates which shut in the saint of God opened without the aid of human hands. The angel of the Most High enters, and they close again noiselessly behind him. When I read this, it was very interesting because the angel didn't just show up in the cell room, but it says that he walked through the gates. Now, just imagine your door at home sometimes does make a little noise when you open it. Imagine these old prison gates, how much squeaking and how much noise they could have made. But it says that nobody heard anything. They opened with no noise, and the angel walked right in. Let's follow. He enters the cell, hewn from the solid rock, and there lies Peter, sleeping the blessed, peaceful sleep of innocence and perfect trust in God, while chained to a powerful guard on either side of him. The light which envelops the angel illuminates the prison, but does not waken the sleeping apostle. And the last line in the paragraph, his is the sound repose that invigorates and renews, and that comes of a good conscience. Now, Peter, unlike the first time when he was faced with persecution, this time he had a good conscience. And what happens when you have a good conscience? You sleep good. And Peter has done what was required of him. The Lord now kept him in peace, in a good conscience. And even though the angel with his mighty light walked in, that did not awaken Peter. Now let's remember this, because we will be facing trials, tribulations, but if we have a clear, good conscience, we can sleep as deep as Peter, even though he was chained on each side by a guard. So I'd like to share a little bit with you on this graph. When we talk about sleep, there is the light sleep and the deep sleep. The acronyms that are used here, non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement. We know that when we go to sleep, there are a few stages to that. So the first three stages are part of the non-rapid eye movement. And the last stage, more towards like the morning, it is the rapid eye movement. So in the first stage, light transitional sleep happens. Then in the second stage, there is more stable sleep. And now the third stage It is the deep sleep. That's where a lot of things happen in the body, among which growth hormones are released. And then, of course, towards the end, before morning, we have the rapid eye movement, where a lot of dreams are happening with such intensity, and you wake up in the morning and you feel that you dreamed so much. Now, there is another graph I would like to share with you, which shows the brain waves of wake and sleep. The first waves showed us awake, so as we are right now. Then it moves into what we mentioned, the non-rapid eye movement, which is the deep sleep. So you see how these waves are much deeper. And then towards the morning, you see how the rapid eye movement sleep, it's mostly similar to the awake stage. So that's right before we are waking up. And it is possible, we believe, the way the Bible relates, that Peter was in that deep, non-rapid eye movement sleep, where it's really hard to wake up someone. And if you are not completing all these phases through the night, you wake up in the morning and you do not feel fully rested. And we're going to cover more on this. But before we go into that, our body has a rhythm, and we call it the circadian rhythm. So what is your circadian rhythm? Have you heard of this before? It is your body's internal 24-hour biological clock. It's present in every cell and organ of your body. It is a master program that guides our wake-sleep cycle. And it keeps every gene, cell, and organ working at its peak. So we learned that this circadian rhythm basically regulates various psychological and behavioral processes in the body, such as sleep-wake patterns, body temperatures, hormone release, and alertness. So having this in mind, we will learn a little more about how this can impact us. So how is the circadian rhythm in action? It ensures that your body processes do their work perfectly at specific points during the 24-hour cycle. And these timely activities in our bodies improve our immunity and help prevent diseases. But they also speed up repair when we are injured. And we're going to learn now that there are two central parts of this process. So the first part, it is our central clock, and then we're going to talk about the peripheral clock, just to touch a little bit on the anatomy of how this works. So our central clock, or suprachiasmatic nucleus, it is located in the middle part of the brain, called the hypothalamus. Have you heard of the hypothalamus? Yes. Above where our optic nerves cross. And our circadian rhythm is meant to get a bright light push every morning at dawn. So this is part of the central clock. And hypothalamus, it is the place where all these central processes are happening. So what happens in the morning when you receive the bright light, that signals the hypothalamus to block the melatonin, which also helps you sleep through the night. So now we talked about the central. What about the peripheral clocks? These are found in the heart, in the lungs, in the kidneys, genes in our liver, digestive tract, and microbiome. Just to give a little brief understanding. But now, what drives our peripheral clocks? So we learned that light drives the central clock. The peripheral clocks are driven by the food intake, and of course, just as morning light syncs the central clock in our brain, as I mentioned, so a morning meal can help sync our peripheral clock in the rest of the body. That's what we're going to also spend a moment on. So we're going to come back about the meal part as we progress through the study, but let's cover some secrets to good sleep. Because we can all agree, if you have a good sleep through the night, you can wake up smiling in the morning, and your duties, your day doesn't seem to be heavy or loaded, and you're able to go through it. So what do you have to do? You have to be consistent, which means you have to go to bed the same time every day. Now, this is something that I have to admit, I fail on this one. And you don't have to raise your hand if you fail as well. Well, however, if you go to sleep before 10 o'clock, feel free to raise your hand because that is what's recommended. So I don't see too many hands up, but thank you for your feedback. So if you do that, continue consistency into this, it's definitely helpful. And also in the weekends, we have to keep the same schedule. It doesn't matter week or weekend to allow the body to learn about this habit and to regenerate. Now, I'd like to share a paragraph from the Spirit of Prophecy. I know from the testimonies given me from time to time for brain workers that sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. 2 hours good sleep before 12 o'clock, it's worth more than 4 hours after 12 o'clock. So the question is, why is that? Well, the science backs the author up because when you go to bed early and you go to you go into sleep closer to the time when sun sets, that means that you wake up in the morning when the light also rises, and you have gone through all the stages of the sleep, and you will feel refreshed. Now, if you go to bed late and wake up early, what do? You cut off the last part of the sleep cycle, and we're going to cover a little bit. We learn about the rapid eye movement. So pretty much you're cutting off 30 to 40% of your whole sleep cycle. And you lose the benefits of that. Going to bed early, it is important because you really want to have at least 7.5, 8 hours to 9 hours of sleep. And if you can get regularly 7.5 to 8 hours, it's still a good night rest. But essential to go to sleep at least to 9-ish, 10 o'clock, to be able to get those 2 hours before midnight, which we read they are more beneficial than 4 hours after midnight. And it continues. There are young men and young women who are very much opposed to order and discipline. They pay no heed to rules for rising and retiring at regular hours, but burn the midnight oil and then lay in bed in the morning for 1 or 2 hours after daylight. So when the sun rises at 7 o'clock, what is that? 1 or 2 hours past. 8, 9, 10 o'clock. So you probably met too, but I met people in my line of work, and they say, I go to bed at 1, 2, or 3 o'clock. And they still have to wake up in the morning to make it to work at 9. But everybody is dragging their feet, and they feel so miserable. And we are learning why now. They idle away their time in the morning hours and thus make it necessary to stay up at night. You create a reverse cycle. And use fuel and light for which they must be extra expense, when had they properly employed the early hours, there would have been no need of late hours. So now just remember, this article was written in 1893. Back then, they did not have electricity. Back then, they were using kerosene and oils to lighten their homes, and those were expensive. So that's why this statement mentions. Today, it is a little more affordable, but still not a reason not to go to bed early. Would it not be well to break up the habit of turning the precious morning hours into night and turning the hours of night into the day by the use of artificial light? Let youth practice regularity in the hours for going to bed and for rising, and they will improve in health, in mind, in spirit, and in disposition. Let them purpose in their hearts that they will bring themselves under discipline and practice orderly rules. God is a God of order, and it is the duty of the youth to observe strict rules. For such practices will work for their advantages. It refers and addresses to the youth especially, because when you are young, you feel that you have so much energy that you can do whatever, and then later on you learn there are some things you are now deficient. You learn that there are some health issues that you are encountering, and it seems like they all start at this point. Now, what can disrupt your circadian rhythm? Because we talked about ideal, we talked about the consistency, but there are some things that will come across, and that's irregular meals, irregular sleep schedule, too much screen time before bed. We're going to come back to that. Of course, stress, because we live in the society we live, jet lag, lack of exercise, of course, certain medications, shift work. When I go to my job sometimes, the director of the nursing home says, "I'm sorry, Gabriel, I didn't finish this because I had to work a night shift, and then I also have to come the day shift to do my work." So it really messes up the sleep cycle. Significant changes in daily routine, it's what it's covered under. So the question is, how does irregularity in your circadian rhythm affect our health? Because it all comes down to this. It is called chronodisruption, which maintaining your internal clocks in sync is very important to your health. And it sounds like we are all aware of that. Now, when your central, as we talked, which was the hypothalamus, and peripheral clocks, which we learned is the heart, the lungs, the liver, get out of sync, you have what it's called chronodisruptions. And this disruption will cause short and long-term health problems. And I'm just going to cover a few of the short-term and the long-term just to kind of see if we identify with any of these. Short-term effects of chronodisruptions are fatigue, trouble concentrating, poor sleep quality, irritability, memory loss, lower alertness, difficulty making decisions, mood swings, and digestive problems. Now, if those are being continued, and if you continue in that pattern, it will lead to the long-term effect of chronodisruptions. So you have increased risk of heart and blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, certain cancers, depression and anxiety, delay in wound healing, and hormonal changes. So we see all these, they have a common root. It is the way we treat our body. And sleep seems to be one of the areas in which we can really jeopardize our health, or we can actually help it. So what can we do to optimize the circadian rhythm? What did we say? Stick to a daily schedule. Sleep 8 hours each night. It is recommended to get 30 minutes to 60 minutes of morning daylight, and to exercise daily, at least half an hour to an hour, preferably outdoors. So we're going to cover some of those as we go in the time that we have left. How can we make proper use, or wisely we can use the light, especially the early morning light? Because there are two keys to use light to sleep better and to get a good amount of sleep. There are people now that are setting up devices to lit up their room when they wake up in the morning, but that's why we have the sun. That's why we have God's gift for us. And you want to get early morning light. The best thing to do is to go outside and get early morning sunlight to turn off the production in your brain of what? Melatonin. The moment you do that, the body starts the day. If it is off all day, you get a better release at night. So if you block it in the morning and it's blocked the whole day, in the night, when the light dims out after sunset, you get a much better release of melatonin. At the minimum, if you do not go outside, open up the windows So the light comes in, which means that at night, of course, you want to close them and have it dark. Now, in the same line, we talked about darkness. Darkness, it is key. It is the key at night. So you want the room to be dark. I hear people, they like to sleep with their TV on. You know, all that blue light, all that noise. You want the room not to be overheated. You want to have a cooler temperature in the room so that your body temperature drops to facilitate falling asleep and to get the best quality sleep that we mentioned about. So darkness is the key to a good sleep. As we talked about how light is beneficial in the morning, the natural light to block the melatonin, you see in this graph how in the night we want to block that, and we're going to come back to this. And I want to share this graph here. So what happens? It is the blue light that is the most damaging. Now, where is the blue light coming from? The phones, the tablets, TV, computers. The question is, do you know how long before going to sleep we should actually turn those off? Okay, somebody said an hour. What about anybody else? Take a guess. How long before going to sleep? We have 30 minutes, very conservative, or very gifted rather, but more conservative, it says that 2 to 3 hours before we go to sleep, we have to be detached from those devices. And the reason is, as we see in the graph, the blue light, it's the one that suppresses the production of melatonin. So if you are staying light with your phones in your hand, it blocks the release of melatonin, and then some of us will have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep through the night. And today, let's admit it, that all of us, or most of us, they are holding their cell phones right before we go to sleep. And we're going to learn, if we still do that, there is one way in which we can at least help ourselves. So at nighttime, turn off blue light devices 2 hours minimum before sleep. And the lights should be dim and near to the floor. Sometimes we have those plugs in the wall. And also, do not drink too much water before going to sleep. What's that going to do to you? It's going to wake you up. So it's going to disrupt your sleep. And in the summer, do not eat watermelon before going to sleep because it draws a lot of water. Now, there is another aspect. Avoid caffeine. And why is that important? Because the half-life of caffeine, it is about 4 to 6 hours. And it also depends on how it's metabolized. So if you drink a cup of coffee in the morning, a third can still be in your body by the time you actually go to bed. And we know that caffeine blocks the adenosine release, so you lose the weight of adenosine on the brain, and it makes you feel sleepy. And you think that you have all this energy, you think you are wide awake, but the adenosine is building up, and the next day, the leftover adenosine will affect you. So you'll be foggy, you will think that you need another cup of coffee to help your body. And then the next day, it happens the same, and you are just in this cycle in which you are building up adenosine that will make you feel even more worse, and you're going to increase the amount of caffeine and coffee that you drink per day. Well, when I was preparing this study, I came across this slide. It's very interesting. On the left side, it shows a spider web. And you see on the left side, there is the normal spider building up their web. But on the right-hand side, on those 4 squares, the spider was exposed to some drugs, LSD, speed, marijuana, and caffeine. So you can see what happened to the pattern of the building of the web when the spider was exposed to such drugs or caffeine for that reason. And to me, it seems like caffeine was the most offsetting one based on the graph over here. So let's just remember that there are other ways in which you can probably, keep yourself warm in the morning. You can probably decrease the amount of caffeine by doing decaf or half and half, and then taper that out until you completely wean off of it. Because we know that decaf still has some caffeine in it. So I'm sure you probably came across Roma. I'm not endorsing anything, but just because it has the ground barley, if anyone needs still a hot drink in the morning, you can use these because it's caffeine free, it's non-GMO, and also there are some tea that you can drink in the morning. Let's pay attention that teas can also have caffeine. The whiter the tea, the less caffeine, but the darker the tea, the most caffeine that it has. So we have to be selective about this as well. While this might not impact us, we can share it with others. Alcohol can also impact the way we sleep. There is a study that if you drink at night, depending on how many glasses you have, you can jeopardize your sleep to almost 40%. And even a low amount of alcohol can decrease the sleep by 9.3%. So it will mess with your sleep quality, and because of that, we all know how that feels. Now, in the same category, we talk about medication, sleeping pills. People go to the doctor's office and they want to have their Ambien, their Xanax. They come to the pharmacy, and if the pharmacy doesn't give it when they need it, it's big trouble. I've seen that all the time. These are the people that are sometimes the most addicted, and they are the ones that are the most demanding. So what is that doing to you? What are the sedatives doing to your mind? It turns off parts of the brain, and they do not allow the brain to rest and restore and give you the sleep quality. Some people, they might use it, they could use it for a short period of time, but we should not endorse such ways into falling asleep. Another aspect which doesn't have scientific proof, but we all know that praying before going to bed actually can be beneficial. Having a nighttime prayer, it is important before you go to bed. Just as when you get into a car and you pray for God's protection, at night we should pray to God and be the one that we talk last before going to bed. The last person you should speak to is your God before you place yourself in the vulnerable position of sleep. You know, if you're married, you can still talk to your spouse, but the idea is to ask God to give you sweet, deep sleep, rejuvenating, to be able to function the next day. Now let's go back to the Bible. We read this Bible verse many times, but I would like to share it with you. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 24. When thou layest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lay down and sleep, and thy sleep shall be sweet. So do not be afraid of the end of the world. We know it's coming. There is a lot of people that are panicking. There is a lot of people that are, doing all kind of things, prepping. David, he slept well. Jesus slept well in the storm. Peter slept well in the prison dungeon, being tied to 2 soldiers. So what is your excuse for not sleeping good? We have to trust God. And David says in Psalms chapter 3, verses 4 through 6, I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. I lay me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Now, this is very critical. This is very important, not to be afraid, not to panic. And I think David is the most entitled one to say that people were after him to take his life. Who's after you to take your life? We live in a society in which we do have to work, we do have to do our duties, but at night, in our communication with God, we should ask for a good sleep and trust in him. Now, another important aspect of a good sleep, it is to exercise early. You have to understand that if you exercise late, what happens to your body? It raises your body temperature. And what did we say your body temperature needs to be when you go to sleep? It has to be cooler. It has to be lower. So it's going to be a little harder because the heart is racing and it cannot calm down for that good night rest. And one of the good things about exercising early in the morning is that after you probably had some lemon water, as we are advised so many times, your blood sugar is actually low and you can drop it even lower. And especially for those that are pre-diabetic or diabetic, actually, you can drop your blood sugar and it will stay down low until you start to eat. So you give your body a chance to become insulin sensitive. Insulin insensitivity may be well tied to some sleep problems that people have. So you see how amazing the body works, and it gives us the understanding of how we should treat it. Going back to the Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12, the sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eateth little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. Now, when you labor, when you exercise, your sleep must be sweet. So that's why everything has to be done balanced. And I left this as the last point on this list. No food at least 3 hours before bedtime. Now, for some of us, including myself, I have to admit, this is a hard thing to do. Personally, sometimes I get off work at 9. By the time I get home, it's 10. So I find myself guilty, I have to admit, of eating late. What happens in your body if you do that? You know, all that process, it has to still happen. The food has to be digested, but the stomach impairs now a good sleep. So it will increase the risk of acid reflux, which will wake you up in the middle of the night. And I'm sure we all experience that, and it is unpleasant because what it does, it really messes up your sleep cycle. So we have to eat at regular times and to practice time-restricting eating. So what does that mean? Eat all your meals within an 8 to 12 hour window. So you have that daytime window to eat your meals. If you need to lose weight, or if your body processes a little slower, 2 meals a day, it's more recommended within a 6 hour period. Eat breakfast daily. And I would like to come back to that. Avoid eating, we said, at least 3 hours before bedtime. So if you go to sleep at 9 or 10, that means that no food should be coming in past 6 or 7 o'clock. It's something that I'm still praying about, and if that's something you're still struggling with, pray about it as well. Now, I did mention we're going to come back to the breakfast, because breakfast, it is the most important meal of the day. So what happens? Skipping breakfast disrupts the normal expression and rhythm of these clocks. What were the 2 clocks that we talked about? The central clock and the peripheral clock. And as a review, what was the central clock? Hypothalamus. And right, and then in the peripheral tract, all our organs of the body. So it disrupts this cycle. Now it's interesting. I looked up statistics in America. 25% of the Americans, they skip breakfast altogether. They just don't even eat breakfast. Also, among the Gen Z, people below the age of 26, they skip breakfast in a proportion of 40%. So people who skip breakfast may have a tendency to eat more carbohydrates, sugars, and saturated fats. So what is that doing to your body? So these people, they also eat less fiber in the day, and they may have a lower quality diet. So we see how important to eat breakfast, and to eat it regularly should be the most important part or meal of the day. Now, as we're coming towards the conclusion, there are a few more sleep tips that we can take. Naps should not be done before 3 p.m. So if you sleep past 3 o'clock, you're already jeopardizing your night's sleep. There are countries in which they have a siesta from 1 to 2 and no later than 3 o'clock. Read or play soothing music before bed because you want, your mind, your brain to calm down. If you cannot fall asleep, get up and do something relaxing, because just sitting in bed, it's not going to help much. Do not look at the clock if you cannot sleep. So when you wake up in the night, do not be tempted to look at the clock. If you snore or have persistent trouble with sleep, you might have to see a specialist, because it might be having other problems. Sometimes you have that moment where you stop breathing for a second or two. That is not good for the body. And of course, the quality of the mattress and the pillows, it makes a big difference to get a good night rest. So now, as we go back to the Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12, "Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep." So even the Bible hints to the idea that we should make sure our stomach is empty before we go to bed. There is a whole lot of arguing. We talked about how many hours. Make it that it works for you, whatever your cycle and schedule is. And I know this is something that individually we have to work on, but it can be done if we consistently do the same thing. And going back to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 24, "When thou layest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lay down, and thy sleep shall be sweet." And God wants to give us, or to give each one of you, a sweet sleep. And like Peter in the beginning of this message, he was so confident in God under any circumstances. He was timid and afraid in the beginning, as we read about his experience. But along the way, his conversion came and he sleeps much better. So the redemption of our souls also depends on our connection with God, first of all, and the way we live our lives. If we are connected with God, we can sleep deeply, we can sleep easily. Sleep is important because it clears the brain, washes the glial cells, and removes the toxins from the brain. It allows for emotional healing. But sleep is also a time to just trust God. And you cannot sleep well if you do not rest well. And the last paragraph I would like to share with you before closing, from the youth instructor: "The very best preparation we can have for his second coming is to rest with firm faith, with trust and unshaken confidence in the great salvation brought to us at his first advent. We must believe that Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many. And you must be able to rest your problems in Christ." What did Jesus say in Matthew 11:28? "Come unto me, all of us that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Only through his rest we can enjoy his redemption. It is my wish and prayer for each one of you. Amen.
Amen.